The paperwork was perfect. Her credit score, immaculate. The income, more than enough. She had glowing references, a steady job, and a full month's rent in hand. And yet, as Ayanna sat in the leasing office, watching the man behind the desk flip through her file with forced politeness, she could already feel it coming, the rejection wrapped in a smile. He didn't look at her paperwork for more than 30 seconds. His eyes glanced up at her scarf, her skin, her bare left hand, where a diamond ring would have once been, had she worn it that morning. Then came the questions, not the standard ones, but the kind that scratched the surface of doubt, just enough to leave a mark. And what do you do exactly? How long have you lived in the U.S.? Your husband isn't with you today? His tone never changed, but the temperature in the room dropped degree by degree. She answered everything calmly, her voice steady, her expression still. She had walked into offices like this before. She knew the script. And when he finally set the file down and gave her that manufactured sigh, the one that pretended to be regret, she already knew what he'd say. We've actually just received another application, all cash. Sorry, it moved really fast. He stood up, offered his hand. Ayanna shook it, thanked him, and walked out the front door with her chin high. Not because she wasn't angry, she was. Not because it didn't hurt, it did. But because she refused to give this man the satisfaction of seeing it. She stood at the curb, the sun hot on her face, her phone heavy in her hand. She opened her messages and typed 2 words to her husband. All set. 2 minutes later, a low hum filled the street. Not loud, but commanding. A silver McLaren 720S turned the corner like a whispered arrival, clean and surgical. Heads turned, curtains shifted. Even the leasing agent peeked out from the office window. The car rolled to a stop right in front of her. The driver's side door lifted, sleek, elegant, effortless, and out stepped Marcus Desai. Sharp charcoal suit, brushed steel watch, a face as calm as hers, but with eyes that held centuries of earned restraint. He didn't look at the building. He didn't look at the man inside. He looked at Ayanna, smiled softly, and said, "So, how'd it go?" She slipped into the passenger seat. The door closed with a whisper, and the man inside the leasing office realized he hadn't just turned away a tenant. He'd walked away from a name that opened doors in every corner of the city. But now, that door would stay closed to him. The morning had started just like any other, with soft jazz in the kitchen, a mug of ginger tea cooling on the windowsill, and sunlight pouring into the little Airbnb that Ayanna and Marcus had been calling home for the last few weeks. It wasn't much, just a short-term rental in a decent neighborhood, but it was temporary. They were only in this city because Marcus had been tapped to lead a new regional office, and their plan had always been simple. Get in, settle quickly, move forward. Ayanna had taken the lead on finding their next place. It wasn't just a task, it was something she genuinely enjoyed. She loved the bones of a good apartment, the weight of old wood floors, the way light moved through space in the afternoon, and most of all, she loved making a place feel like them. Books on every surface, art from their travels, a sofa they could fall asleep on by accident. That morning, she had 3 appointments lined up. The first 2 had gone well. Nothing spectacular, but decent enough. Then came the third, the one she had quietly been the most excited about. A top-floor unit in a historic brownstone near the park. Exposed brick, big windows, a little balcony. The kind of place you knew would feel like home before you even unpacked the first box. She arrived 10 minutes early, dressed neatly in a cream blouse and navy slacks. Nothing flashy, but tasteful. professional, polished. She had her folder in hand, references, income verification, bank statements, a pre-written cover letter explaining their move and her interest in the building. She had done this before. She was always over-prepared, and people always noticed. Except today. The leasing office was small and clinical. A desk, 2 chairs, a waiting bench, and a coffee machine that hadn't been cleaned since March. The leasing agent, Rick, stood behind the counter typing when she walked in. He didn't look up right away. When he did, the flicker of recognition didn't come. No smile, no warmth. She introduced herself politely, handed over her paperwork. Rick took it with a distracted nod and began flipping through the pages like he was already late for something. She sat down across from him. He didn't ask her about her work at the nonprofit. He didn't ask about the references she'd included. 2 CEOs, a judge, and a director at the public library. He didn't comment on her perfect credit score, or the fact that she was offering 3 months' rent up front. Instead, he asked, "So, your husband's not here today?" It wasn't phrased with curiosity. It was a scan, a quiet line of judgment. She explained simply that Marcus was in meetings all morning, that she'd be the one handling the rental agreement, that all financials were included. Rick nodded slowly, then picked up his phone. "Give me a minute to check something." He stepped into the back office and stayed there for nearly 10. When he returned, he didn't have a lease in hand. No tour offer, no smile of approval, just a shrug. "Yeah, so? Actually, we had someone come in right after you called yesterday. Full cash offer. We're probably going to move forward with them." She looked at him. Not coldly, just openly. The way you look at someone when you know they're lying, but they've convinced themselves you won't call them on it. She gathered her folder, stood, thanked him for his time, walked out the door. She didn't flinch. Not here, not in front of him, because Ayanna knew better than to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her bruised. But inside, she was tired. Not from one rejection, but from a lifetime of silent ones. Doors that didn't open when she knocked politely. Smiles that disappeared once the last name came into view. Conversations that stopped the moment her voice joined in. She stepped out onto the curb, took a breath, and looked at the sky. Wide, blue, unforgiving. Then she reached for her phone and texted one line. All set. The heat had risen by the time she reached the sidewalk. Not unbearable. Just enough to make the concrete pulse beneath her flats. She didn't move right away. She just stood there, still holding her folder like it might give her something back. Her face was unreadable, the way it had learned to be. Calm. Beautiful. Unbothered, even when she wasn't. People passed, a jogger, a woman with a stroller, a man in a linen shirt who looked like he was late for lunch. None of them knew what had just happened behind that glass door. None of them saw how something so polished could still be so small, so cowardly. Ayanna tucked the folder under her arm and pulled out her phone. She scrolled briefly, then opened the thread labeled M. Her husband never liked long texts. They didn't need them. All set, she wrote. No punctuation, no explanation. 2 minutes later, a message came back. On my way. She slipped the phone back into her bag, adjusted her scarf, smoothed the line of her blouse with the palm of her hand, and waited. It was quiet for a moment. Then she heard it. Not a roar, but a low, expensive hum, like something designed to be noticed without trying. The McLaren turned the corner like it belonged to the moment, sleek, silver, and deliberate. Its body caught the sunlight like it was wearing it. It pulled up slowly, no screeching, no drama, and came to a stop right in front of the leasing office's wide windows. From inside, Rick looked up, at first just curious, then cautious. The car was unmistakable, one of those machines you don't test drive, you're invited to own. The kind that doesn't announce wealth, it assumes it. The driver's side door lifted like a wing, and Marcus stepped out. There was no introduction, no performative entrance. He didn't scan the building or meet Rick's gaze. He didn't need to. He walked with quiet precision, every detail considered. Crisp tailored pants, a pale blue dress shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled once at the cuff, a watch that whispered 6 figures, worn like an afterthought. He went straight to Ayanna. No need for questions. He kissed her forehead, took her bag gently from her shoulder, and asked one thing. "So, how'd it go?" She looked up at him, smiled the way people do when they've already let go of something. They passed. Marcus paused, just enough to let the words land, then nodded. Their loss. Rick had stepped outside now. He stood half in shadow, squinting as if trying to put something together that he'd fumbled the first time. Marcus looked over briefly. Not a glare, just awareness, then turned back to Ayanna. "Ready to go see the penthouse on 5th? She nodded, already sliding into the passenger seat. The door lifted, then lowered like a secret. The McLaren purred back to life. They pulled away slowly, and Rick just stood there, holding an empty clipboard, with no idea what or who he had just let slip through his fingers. By the time the McLaren turned onto 5th Avenue, the energy in the car had already shifted. Ayanna wasn't fuming. She wasn't even frustrated. She was just tired, in that specific familiar way Black women get tired, not from the weight of a single insult, but from the accumulation of being underestimated, of being asked to prove again and again that she belonged in rooms her resume should have unlocked the moment she walked in. Marcus glanced over at her, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the gear shift, like it had always been made for it. He didn't say anything right away. He didn't have to. Their silence had a language, and today it was fluent. The building on 5th was a different world entirely. White-gloved doormen, glass that looked expensive to touch. They were greeted by name. A private elevator opened just for them. The penthouse tour was quiet and respectful. No one asked about her husband. No one asked for proof of funds. No one blinked at her scarf or her skin. By the time they stepped onto the private terrace overlooking the park, Marcus turned to her and said simply, "Do you want it?" Ayanna looked out at the skyline, at the treetops glowing gold in the late sun. "Yes," she said, "but only if they don't ask me to perform for it." He smiled. "Then we'll take it." And just like that, they did. Back at the leasing office, the air was different. Rick stood at the window for longer than he realized, replaying the scene, the car, the man, the woman he'd dismissed in less than 5 minutes, the last name on the application, Desai. It suddenly rang louder than it had earlier. He Googled it. Within seconds, he was staring at headlines. Marcus Desai's next move, tech, real estate, and quiet power plays. The founder behind the firm that funded the waterfront. The man who doesn't show up often, but when he does, you'd better have your act together. Rick leaned back in his chair, suddenly aware of how small his desk felt. The next morning, a call came in from corporate. They'd like to reconnect with Mr. and Mrs. Desai. Just a friendly follow-up. "We want to see if there's anything we can do." Rick took down the message. He never got a chance to relay it. Because Marcus never called back. Ayanna never replied to the follow-up email. The silence was the answer. And in their world, silence from people like Marcus spoke louder than the flashiest lawsuit. A month later, Ayanna sat on the terrace of their new home, sipping mint tea as sunlight fell across her lap. A breeze moved through the city. She wore a linen robe and gold hoops, her hair wrapped high in a silk scarf that caught the light. Her phone buzzed with a message. Board vote approved. You're in? She was now an official member of the city's Housing Advocacy Review Council, the people who vet policy, zoning, and public-private developments, including the one Rick worked for. She smiled, not out of vengeance, just understanding, because the door they once shut in her face, now she had the keys to all of them. It had been 6 weeks since the door had closed behind her at that leasing office. Ayanna hadn't thought much about it since, not because it hadn't stung, but because she had learned a long time ago. Some wounds are too familiar to bleed anymore. You don't forget them. You just stop carrying them around like they still belong to you. Life had moved forward. Her name now appeared on a letterhead that arrived in the inboxes of developers, city planners, and real estate heads across the city. And on the nights when she sat in quiet meetings around glossy conference tables, she never once raised her voice. But when she spoke, everyone listened. There was something about her presence, precise, steady, unshakable, that demanded attention without ever asking for it. And the best part? She never told that story. The one about the leasing office, about the man who smiled like a gatekeeper, not realizing he was guarding the wrong gate. She didn't have to, because her being there told the story better than her words ever could. One Thursday afternoon, Ayanna left a housing equity meeting and took a slow walk through her old neighborhood. The sun warmed the pavement, and she passed cafes she had once scouted online, buildings she had once mapped on her iPad. She didn't intend to stop, but her feet carried her. There it was, the building, the office, same dusty blinds, same nameplate on the glass. Inside, someone new sat at the front desk, a young woman, maybe early 20s, black hair braided back in neat rows. She looked up, smiled warmly as Ayanna stepped in. Hi, welcome. Can I help you? Ayanna smiled. No, thank you. Just passing through. She glanced down at the stack of pamphlets on the counter. Her eyes paused on one of them, a brochure with a gold seal from the housing council she now served on. On the cover, Fair Housing Starts with Listening. She gently picked one up and handed it to the woman. You already are, Ayanna said. Then she walked out. No mic drop, no last words, just presence. That evening, she and Marcus sat on their terrace as the city stretched and shimmered around them. The table was set for dinner, jazz playing low through the outdoor speakers, a bottle of wine breathing between them. Did I tell you, she said, they finally sent me the minutes from that zoning session. Marcus smiled. The one where the guy said he just wasn't sure she had enough experience, until she rewrote the policy draft overnight? That's the one. He laughed. And to think, they didn't even want to give you an apartment. Ayanna looked out over the skyline, glass in hand. They didn't give me anything, she said. I took the long way home, that's all. In a city full of doors, she had learned not to knock, but to build. And now, when the next woman like her came looking, she wouldn't find a smile that sized her up. She'd find Ayanna's name on the policy that held that door open. A young woman walks into the leasing office, nervous, hopeful. She's holding a manila folder thick with references and signed forms. The new agent smiles and gestures her to sit. "Take your time," she says. "Tell me what matters most to you in a home." The girl breathes out slowly. She hadn't expected that question. She begins to answer. Outside, traffic hums. Somewhere, a silver McLaren glides past the corner without slowing. It doesn't need to stop anymore, because the message was already delivered.